we are here with two narrative warriors, as I like to call them. Narrative warriors who we all know, very well read, and who are trying to revisit and decolonize our reading of our Indic culture and history. But who defines the Indic way, fundamentally? Who gets left out when it becomes an instrument of narrative power, for example? These are some questions that we must explore, because so many people say that history is being rewritten to pursue some interest, some political interest. So let me begin with you first, Sanjeev Sanyal. You advocate for a civilizational lens in statecraft. But can policy rooted in the past, in the ancient, still have relevance today in this complex world, modern plural nation states, the vicissitudes of time and dogma, etc.? How does that work?
So let me say first that think about how our history is explained to us at a meta level. You will get the impression from reading our history that, it's a long series of defeats that Indians have had against. Every time some passing fellow from Central Asia came by, they defeated us, ruled over us. Even our Vedic culture that we are proud of was given to us by some white people who came from Central Asia. And even our freedom struggle is taught to us in a very peculiar way, in which you get the impression that Gandhiji gently suggested to the British that they should leave, and they politely left. So if that is the narrative in which we are all the becharas who are getting handouts from the rest, and even Vedic culture was given to us by the white people, and so the impression is that the British Raj was basically a software update when another bunch of white people came and sort of reformed us, all the great reformers of the 19th century, stopped sati and all this, and of course gave us the railways. So we are given this impression that our entire culture and civilization is us being becharas, who are, being handed out by, occasionally civilized by these passing hordes. And we really are passive recipients of the vicissitudes of time. That is the impression you'll get from. So what I did is dig into this and look into this. Look, we are the oldest continuous civilization. Surely we must have won a few battles along the way. There must be some strength in us that after all these thousands of years, I'm still chanting the Gayatri Mantra. So there must be something going on. So I dug into this and I discovered that the history is completely different from what we are being told. So for example, completely different. So I'll give you one example. You'll get the impression, there were these caste rules about crossing the seas. So we Indians had a peculiar people that we lived right next to one of the biggest oceans in the world. In fact, oddly enough, the only nation which actually has an ocean named after it. But we showed no interest in crossing it or sailing into it, etc. Which is, of course, nonsense. Because you just have to go to Southeast Asia and see the enormous influence of India everywhere. I mean, the largest Hindu temple in the world is not in India. It's in Cambodia. The largest Buddhist structure in the world is in Indonesia. The history of Korea begins with the marriage of a princess of Ayodhya to a local prince. So we were clearly everywhere. And indeed, once you begin digging into it, we discover that we have a maritime history that is perhaps the longest and most exciting in the world, going back to the Bronze Age, from the Harappan period.
That's right.
We have a continuous history. So what I'm trying to do is to simply dig this up and present it. And one is to write books and so on, which also I do, and so does Vikram and others. But I thought there are other interesting ways of doing it. So one way I'm doing it, for example, I am actually building a Gupta period ship from the 5th century. No nails in it. We're going to stitch it together with rope, literally the old style. And that ship has already been sort of tested in water. Next month, we will name it. And hopefully, if all the testing goes well, in December, we will sail it to Oman.
Wonderful.
Just to demonstrate to everybody that we used to do these kinds of voyages 1,000 years before, or many thousand years before Columbus.
And you're going to take me along, and TV18, and we'll do a documentary on that.
If you're willing to suffer through 2-3 weeks without bathing, you're on.
Wonderful, wonderful, as long as we don't get scurvy. But Vikram Sampath, now you've written extensively about figures erased or vilified, and for the benefit of our viewers, he's written one of the definitive biographies of Savarkar. Now, if I would ask you one adjective to define Savarkar, a lot of you people might come out and say he was a coward, British apologist, this, that, the other. But look, some of these people have been vilified, some erased by the Nehruvian consensus, as you sort of talked about. But is correction, quote unquote correction, the new cover for a selective romanticism?
Just adding to what Sanjeev said, I think it was George Orwell, the novelist, who had said, "He who controls the past controls the present and the future." In fact, Orwell had also said that the best way to destroy a people is to deny and obliterate their understanding of their own past. And that is exactly, as Sanjeev pointed out, what the colonial masters did. And sadly, we had a golden opportunity at the turn of independence, which we squandered away in the hallowed Nehruvian consensus that you mentioned. Now look, when you talk of revisionism, there was a very famous historian who said every work of history is an interim report. And every generation looks back and, drawing from its own experience, tries to revisit the past. Everything about the past, if it is already cast in stone and we already knew it, then professional historians like me would go out of job. So it is a constant dialogue. History is a constant dialogue between the historian and his or her sources and how one interprets it. So revisionism is not a bad word. It's an intrinsic element of the discipline itself. Along with some of these, distortions that Sanjeev pointed out, in fact, he also became the inspiration for me to write one book on precisely these battles we won, titled Brave Hearts of Bharat. We have had another very terrible, trend in our historiography, which is to deny and put under the carpet all the uncomfortable truths about our own past. Now, we've had a very long and troubled history. Will Durant had said the Islamic conquest of India is one of the bloodiest tales of human history, not just of Indian history. But do our popular narrative, do our history textbooks talk about the kind of civilizational wound that this has caused? Because we somehow, falsely labor under a misapprehension that talking about these truths of history is going to upset today's social cohesion. Communities will get upset. Why should communities of today get upset if you talk about Ghazni and Ghori and Timur and Aurangzeb, who's now all the time exorcised from the tomb, or Tipu Sultan, about whom I've written? The communities of today, the Muslims of today, are not responsible for what all these barbarians did. But the converse also needs to be true, that communities today should not be hyphenated with these barbarians. They should not look up to them as their role models, go to their tombs and read, psalms to them. And we need to de-hyphenate
But why?
this.
We're in a democracy. We're allowed to sort of idealize whoever we want to for whatever reason.
Well, tomorrow someone might want to idolize even a General Dyer, which, exactly what Tipu Sultan did. In my latest book, I cover it as to how on the eve of Deepavali, he invites about 700 men, women and children of a particular community of Mandyam Iyengars for a feast. And while they're in the midst of the feast, the temple doors are closed and elephants are left to trample them all to death. Now, this was very similar to what General Dyer did at Jallianwala Bagh. There we have a General Dyer Jayanti, like how we have a Tipu Jayanti in the state that I come from, in Karnataka, where Section 144 had to be imposed, where more than 4 people cannot congregate and celebrate this. What sort of a celebration is this, and for whom? So I think the weaponization of history by politicians and political parties, rather than leaving it to people on the academic front to have different opinions, I think that is what muddies the water. And the fact that we have not told the truth as it is. Itihas, or the word itihasa itself in Sanskrit, translates to it thus happened. Ye aise hua tha. So if it has happened like that, you can't sugarcoat it just because it is politically inconvenient for you today, or you have vote bank politics to pander to.
So, Mr. Sanyal, let me ask you this. Look, organizations such as the RSS, they've reacted with discomfort at the talk around Aurangzeb and the way it was sort of exploded onto our TV screens and into the public sphere. So I have to ask you this because many people are saying Aurangzeb now functions less as a historical figure and more as a cultural flashpoint. Are we weaponizing the past to settle the present?
So first of all, one thing is to be clear, as both of us here are involved in the business of writing out the history. Let's be clear about what the primary facts are. The primary facts are that Aurangzeb did carry out large numbers of massacres of Hindus because of religious bigotry. It was not some political battle. I mean, the imposition of jizya, for example, is known. His pulling down of large number of Hindu temples is a historical fact. Now, what that means in the politics of today, I will leave it to the politicians or other people to,
no, but that's dangerous.
To debate. No, this is precisely the point I'm making to you. That if we are not comfortable with the truth, then this will always fester. We have to be, first of all, comfortable with what actually happened. It's a different matter what the politicians do, that is, you ask them. But I don't think we are going to ever have peace of any kind, social, political or otherwise, if we do not confront which actually these things happened, because there will, the evidence of it is everywhere.
So
I think, Rahul,
let
just
me
to
ask
add
you
to
this.
that.
Yeah, just paraphrasing from where he left off, where does rightful remembrance, he's sort of talking about going back into the past and all of that. Where does this rightful remembrance end and retributive history begin? This is another problem, isn't it?
See, I mean, you have politicians and scholars who also talk about reparations we need from the British. We all the time keep talking about return the Kohinoor, return this and that and so on. Now, what about the period before that? Now, this is, it's not any monetary returns that one is looking for. History also offers a space for healing of communities. Now, these wounds that have been left in the past, there is an intergenerational trauma. Just as the caste oppressions are getting a retributive justice through, reservations and affirmative actions, so also some of these crimes, just the fact that you're talking about them, denying them altogether is just adding, insult to injury.
No, but when you take it forward, for example, in Kashi, Mathura, Gyanvapi, these are sacred causes for restitution. Are there political tools to polarize? Because you talked about reparations. Who's going to give you reparations on these?
So this is something for
anomalies.
The modern society to deal with. And as Sanjeev mentioned, we really need to have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission in India, just as what happened in South Africa, perhaps. Where there, of course, the victim and the perpetrator were alive, and Desmond Tutu got them both to, look each other into the eye. This whole philosophy of Ubuntu, or saying sorry. But here, as I said, the victim and perpetrator are dead. But there is an intergenerational memory and trauma associated with that. So sometimes just talking about it, and as a historian, I would say, let's not be stuck in the past. When Bharat is rising and literally at the threshold of greatness in all ways, I think we should just make peace with this rather than subterfuge, whitewash, suppression, denial of facts. You can't retrofit your history to suit your current needs. You just have to tell it the way it needs to be told, with the caveat that you're not holding today's communities responsible for it. And today's communities should not glorify and associate themselves with barbarians and so on. And to make them comfortable, you don't have to whitewash the truths of history.
Yeah, because it's strange.
And let me show you what happens if you do that.
Yeah.
Pakistan is a very good example of it. It names its missiles after Ghori and Ghazni. Now look at the sheer absurdity of this, because they were not only invaders into India, but in fact into those particular parts of India which is now Pakistan. So the ancestors of the Punjabis and Sindhis who are today's Pakistan and glorifying Ghazni and Ghori were specifically the ones that were under attack by them. Not mine, I'm from Bengal. So Ghazni and Ghori never went that far. So it is actually the Punjabis and Sindhis whose ancestors actually were persecuted by these people. So look at the sheer absurdity of it. And of course, this precise problem causes a serious dissonance inside Pakistani society all the time. In fact, right now, you have, the Afghans who are actually from where the Ghazni and Ghori came from, mocking the Pakistanis for glorifying Ghazni and Ghori, because in fact, these were Afghan invaders.
This is interesting. Mr. Sampath, let's put this slightly differently, but let me stick to this particular point because it's an important one. He's talking about names that are offensive. Now, city names, cityscapes, and institutions here are named after certain individuals. In the West, I find this rather strange because many people say that, look, denying the Holocaust is a reprehensible act of moral subterfuge. But in India, this is accepted.
I mean,
is it accepted? Has it been made to be accepted? Or people just don't know any better? So they don't question.
Look at the enormous hypocrisy, the historical amnesia we suffer from. India was the land of some of the greatest universities in the world. Vikramshila, Takshashila, Nalanda, Udantapuri. All these places were the Harvards and Princetons of our country where Fahian, Hyeonsang, all scholars from all over the world came to study. Now in Nalanda, when Bakhtiyar Khilji attacks Nalanda, it is said that the amount of manuscripts and knowledge that was there when he set it to fire, it burned for 6 long months. That was the knowledge systems of this country that was destroyed. Today you go to the Nalanda ruins and you come out of that place, the town there is named Bakhtiyarpur. Now, Bakhtiyarpur station. Now, which other country in the world, tell me, actually glorifies somebody who ransacked your Oxford and Princeton and Harvard? That is historical amnesia. That is a total lack of historical consciousness. We feel, and this is again the Nehruvian construct, where we feel you need to have a rupture from the past. Let's not even talk about all of this. But you can't chart a new future for Rising Bharat unless you address the problems of the past. These wounds have to heal, and it will heal only through truth, not through subterfuge.
So, Mr. Sanyal, are we at the risk of making the Indic civilizational idea, and some people have a problem with this, too cultural, too Sanskritic, too majoritarian, and therefore too brittle?
No, so I have a problem with this idea. Just because we are bringing up a civilizational view of history, a longer view of history, does not mean that we want to turn it into some sort of a monolithic view. Ironically, the Hindu view and Hinduism itself is hardly anything monolithic. In fact, it is all about diversity. The fact that we have diversity after thousands of years of being a unified civilization and consciously one, we still have so much diversity. It tells you that there is many views of history. I have no problem with different interpretations of the facts. I have no problem with that. After all, you just need to watch your own television debates to see that we cannot decide on what happened yesterday. They are loudly debating about what happened yesterday. So I have no problem about different people having different views of what happened 2,000 years ago. Historians will obviously disagree. The problem is that you are not even agreeing on basic facts which are obvious and clear. You see, you're allowed to your own opinion. You're not allowed your own facts. So this is my real problem. If once you have a set of information, interpreting it slightly differently here or even quite a lot differently here and there and having different impressions of it is perfectly fine. I mean, clearly the Bengali view of history may not be the same as the Kannada view of history. That is fine.
Vikram Sampath, finally, how do we come to terms? You've said truth and reconciliation, maybe that doesn't happen. So you want to obviously educate the masses on what really happened. School curricula can be rewritten, for example, and reflect perhaps the civilizational narrative in the correct perspective, right? Or does that sort of risk state-sponsored history of another kind?
See, I mean, there are always, as I said, multiple versions of history, and every group jostles for its voice to be heard. The problem in India, what happened even in colonial times, where space was provided for the nationalist school of historiography. It was not a bad word to be a nationalist, even under colonial rule, where historians like Sir Jadunath Sarkar, R.C. Majumdar, V.K. Rajwade, K.P. Jaiswal, all these people thrived. It's only after independence, ironically, that all alternative voices were snuffed out. And this very monochromatic, hegemonic rule of Marxist historiography was imposed on everybody. And anybody who didn't subscribe to that had to pay a very heavy price with their careers being destroyed and so on. So I think today there is, thanks to the information age, there's space for multiple voices to be heard. Some of us are doing our work as individuals to correct it. I think Sanjeev is also part of a committee which is trying to correct the school textbooks and their curriculum, which ideally should have happened a long while back, but better late than never, they say. Some of us also in the private sector, be the change that you want to see. So a small example I'd give of myself, where I've started a foundation called the Foundation for Indian Historical and Cultural Research, which is to foster new scholarship in Indian history. The only and only answer to distorted history is to create more and more scholarship, just not complaining and blaming this or the other. And so we are giving out fellowships in the name of Sir Jadunath Sarkar for people to write books. We are actually incubating projects in universities, a current one with Nalanda University on the history of Buddhism in Bharat, which is always used as an area of schism between the two communities. Myths about Ashok and so on, which Sanjeev has busted in the past. So all of this with actually going back to the primary sources. The problem, Rahul, is our history is written in languages that we don't know. I mean, Sanskrit, Pali, Prakrit, Persian, Arabic. It's such a...
and the Indus Valley script. Which
and all of those scripts.
Yeah.
So for a modern historian to learn all these languages, it will take me a couple of lifetimes. So maybe what we are doing here at FIHCR is to create a multidisciplinary group where a historian talks with scholars of those languages, an archaeologist, a geologist, maybe a geneticist and molecular biologist is needed to decode things like this whole Aryan invasion myth and so on. And that is a scholarship that we hope to put out and change the narrative for a rising Bharat.
Well, let's just hope that the two of you can pen more chronicles that reset the framework in which we read our history, and hopefully it'll be more factual. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Put your hands together for two very learned individuals in this lovely conversation we've had. Thank you very much.